Filipinos just shocked the world stage. Even Australia's officials are asking why. Australia didn't expect this. The world didn't expect this. But once again, it's the Filipinos making headlines. Not for drama, not for politics, but for pure, undeniable excellence. In just 1 year, the Filipino community has done what Australia's government couldn't: fill critical jobs, boost industries, and win global recognition all at once. Even Australian officials are asking, how did they do it? Simple. While others complained about shortages, Filipinos quietly became the solution. If you're interested in this topic, hit the like button, subscribe, and type "interested" in the comments, and I will give you a heart. Let's get one thing straight. Australia didn't suddenly discover Filipinos. We've been here for decades, quietly keeping things running while they were too busy calling themselves the lucky country. But luck runs out eventually, and that's exactly what's happening. Australia's been hit by one of the worst labor crises in its modern history. And when everything started falling apart, who did they call? Not robots, not recruitment agencies from Europe. They called us. Now, I know what you're thinking. Haven't we seen this story before? Yes. But this time, it's different. Because Filipinos didn't just show up to fill the gaps, they're leading the transformation of entire industries. And that's what has Australian officials losing sleep and asking the same question over and over. How did Filipinos pull this off? Let's break it down. Australia's Department of Home Affairs recently released a report stating that as of 2025, over 480,000 Filipinos are living and working in Australia, making them the fastest growing migrant workforce in the country. And here's the kicker. They're not just in blue-collar jobs anymore. Filipinos are running construction sites, managing hospitals, teaching in universities, and even starting tech startups in Sydney and Melbourne. The same people the West once labeled as helpers are now becoming bosses. It started with necessity. Australia's labor shortage hit crisis levels in late 2024. More than 437,000 job vacancies across healthcare, education, and engineering. The mining industry? Barely functioning. Agriculture? Losing billions. And when the government scrambled for solutions, they turned to the only workforce that could handle pressure, isolation, and hard work without breaking the Filipino workforce. But here's what stunned them. Filipinos didn't just adapt, they outperformed expectations. Within 6 months, productivity in regions like Western Australia jumped by 22%, thanks largely to Filipino-led teams in construction and logistics. Hospitals across Queensland reported record satisfaction scores after Filipino nurses joined. Even the Australian media had to admit it in one headline from the Sydney Morning Herald. Filipinos are quietly holding the Australian workforce together. Now, let's pause here, because it's easy to celebrate this like it's just another success story. But dig deeper and there's a truth that stings a little. Filipinos aren't thriving because the system is fair, they're thriving despite it. They're outworking locals in a country where the cost of living has skyrocketed 30% since 2023, where rents are breaking records and wages can't keep up. Yet somehow, amidst all that, Filipinos still send money home, still help their families, and still smile. That's not luck, that's willpower forged in hardship. Here's the part that makes officials nervous. Australia's government now realizes they've built an economy that depends on Filipinos. Think about that. The country that once said, "We're doing them a favor by offering jobs," is now whispering, "We can't do this without them." It's the same pattern we've seen in Japan, Canada, and the Middle East, but this time, it's louder. Because this is Australia, one of the richest, most resource-heavy nations in the world, now relying on a workforce from the same region they used to call developing. Let's talk facts. According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, Filipino migrants now have the highest labor participation rate among all Southeast Asian nationalities in Australia, a staggering 82%. Translation? We don't come to chill. We come to work, to build, to make something out of nothing. That's the Filipino DNA. But what's truly shocking Australians isn't just our work ethic, it's our influence. Filipino communities in Sydney, Perth, and Brisbane are now shaping local culture in ways that weren't possible 10 years ago. We're not just employees, we're entrepreneurs, educators, innovators. Filipino restaurants are booming, cultural festivals are drawing tens of thousands. Even Aussie kids are growing up singing OPM and eating adobo. The so-called quiet workers have become loud cultural anchors, and the Australians love it, even if they don't fully get it yet. And then came the record breaker. In April 2025, The Australian Department of Health confirmed that Filipino healthcare workers had achieved a world-first milestone, successfully staffing 98% of critical care positions in regional hospitals during the worst shortage in 30 years. That's a record no other migrant group has ever achieved in Australia. Even the government called it a miracle. But it wasn't a miracle. It was Filipino discipline, the kind that wakes up before dawn, works till midnight, and still calls home to check if their kid ate. You want irony? The same Australian officials who once debated whether migrants took local jobs are now begging for more Filipinos to come over, because they finally realized we don't take jobs, we save them. Now here's where it gets deeper, because what's happening in Australia isn't just about labor, it's about legacy. The children of Filipino migrants are now graduating top of their classes, entering law, medicine, and politics. The next wave of Australian leaders might just have Filipino last names. That's not speculation, that's trajectory. But let's not get too comfortable, because while Australia is finally clapping for us, our own homeland is still losing its brightest minds to this global exodus. Every success story abroad is a silent reminder of what we could have built at home if only our leaders invested the same way foreign nations do. Still, for now, this is our moment. Filipinos didn't ask for Australia's attention, we earned it, with grit, humility, and brilliance that can't be ignored anymore. Australia's officials aren't just asking why, they're asking, how can we keep them? And that's when you know the power dynamic has shifted. Because when a nation's success starts depending on you, you're no longer a guest, you're a force. If you're watching this and your chest feels tight with pride, go ahead and type "Proud Pinoy" in the comments right now. Because this moment isn't about applause, it's about arrival. The Philippines didn't just export talent, it exported excellence. And even Australia, the land of opportunity, just learned what happens when Filipinos show up. Here's where the story gets interesting. Australia's not just impressed anymore. It's confused, shocked even. Because when you break a system, you expect chaos. But what Australia found instead was order, Filipino order. Hospitals running smoother, schools filling staff shortages overnight, industries thriving again. And that's when the realization hit them like a slap they didn't see coming. Wait, how are Filipinos doing this better than us? Let's start with the truth. Australia's education system is one of the best funded in the world. Billions poured into training, research, and institutions. Yet, when push came to shove, it wasn't the top local graduates who saved their sectors. It was Filipino workers with discipline, empathy, and an unshakable sense of purpose. The kind of purpose that doesn't come from textbooks. It comes from struggle, from hunger, from the kind of humility that sharpens into excellence. Australia's Labour Ministry recently published data that left everyone stunned. Filipino workers have the highest job retention rate among all foreign nationals. 94% stay longer than 3 years in their assigned posts. Why? Because we don't quit when it's hard. We only quit when it's done. That's not just a work ethic, that's a worldview. Even Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese addressed it indirectly during a national workforce summit this year, saying, "We need to learn from our migrant communities their work ethic, their optimism, and their loyalty." Translation? We need to learn from Filipinos. It's the polite, political way of admitting the truth everyone already knows. Filipino persistence has become Australia's survival code. But let's zoom out for a second. Why are Filipinos thriving where others stumble? Because we play a different game. Australians value comfort. Filipinos value contribution. They want work-life balance. We want work-life purpose. That's the difference. Australians take breaks to recharge. Filipinos find energy in the people they help. That's not weakness, that's cultural engineering. Here's a wild fact. According to Australia's Department of Health Workforce Data 2025, hospitals with majority Filipino staff have 30% fewer patient complaints and 40% higher morale among local teams. You can't train that in a seminar. That's built into our DNA, that blend of empathy, humor, and relentless positivity that keeps systems human even when the system itself feels inhuman. So, what do you do when the very people you thought were assistants start outperforming you? You ask questions, and that's exactly what's happening behind closed doors in Canberra. Internal documents obtained by the Australian newspaper reveal that officials are conducting behavioral studies on Filipino workers, trying to understand what makes us so adaptable, so dependable, so unstoppable. Imagine that the same country that once lectured others on efficiency is now studying Filipino resilience like it's a science. But here's the funny part, they can't replicate it. Because Filipino strength doesn't come from systems. It comes from stories, from families waiting thousands of miles away, from the drive to make every sacrifice mean something, from faith that borders can separate bodies, but never purpose. You can't put that in an HR manual. You either live it or you don't. Now, while Australia's media calls it the Filipino miracle, the truth is simpler: we just care more. When Filipinos enter a system, they humanize it. We bring life to places that forgot what empathy looks like. In aged care homes, patients are smiling again. In construction, workers sing on site again. In classrooms, kids are learning respect again. That's what happens when you mix skill with soul. But not everyone's clapping. Some Australians are asking uncomfortable questions. Why are foreigners doing the jobs we don't want? Are we losing our own identity? It's classic denial, the same kind the U.S. had before it realized immigrants were keeping its hospitals alive. But here's the thing: Australians don't realize they're not losing anything. They're learning. And the teachers just happen to be Filipino. Even Australia's universities have started catching on. Institutions like the University of Sydney and Monash University are now partnering with Philippine universities to study our community resilience model. You heard that right. They're studying our values. Because they've finally realized that technology can build nations, but it's humanity that sustains them. And you want to hear the biggest twist? Australia's immigration department just released a new category under its skilled worker visa system, essential community contributors. And guess which nationality dominates that list? Filipinos. Over 57% of the approved applicants under that program are from the Philippines. That's not migration, that's validation. Now let's talk about what Australia's officials are whispering but not saying. They know this isn't just about numbers, it's about influence. Because once Filipinos dominate the workforce, culture follows. Values follow. Leadership follows. That's how every great shift begins quietly. And that's exactly what's happening in Australia right now. Filipino influence isn't loud, it's woven into every industry like invisible gold threads. But here's what makes this story sting a little while. Australia is giving Filipinos recognition. Many of our own leaders back home still see us as remittance senders. The same government that benefits from billions in OFW money barely invests in them when they return. It's tragic, isn't it? That other nations can see our worth clearer than our own sometimes do. Still, make no mistake, Australia's awakening is the beginning of something global. When a wealthy, structured country realizes that success isn't about perfection but perseverance, the whole world watches. They're not just asking, why are Filipinos so hardworking? They're asking, what do they have that we lost? That question right there, that's the beginning of respect. Not pity, not flattery, respect. And this is just part 2 of the story. Because in the next chapter, we'll talk about what this Filipino shockwave means for the future, how Australia's dependence is turning into partnership, and how Filipinos might soon lead not just teams, but entire industries. If you're watching this and thinking, it's about time the world sees us, type respect in the comments. Because the truth is, the world's finally realizing that when Filipinos walk into the room, miracles follow. By now, even Australia's top officials have stopped pretending this is just a labor story. It's not. It's a wake-up call. Because what started as "we need more Filipino workers" has evolved into something far more profound. We need to be more like them. See, somewhere between the record-breaking remittances, the rebuilt hospitals, and the thriving small towns powered by Filipino labor, a quiet truth started sinking in. Australia isn't just importing manpower, it's importing values. Let's rewind for a second. A few months ago, Australia's Treasury Department released a report that made politicians sit up straight. The country's economic recovery in 2025 was largely driven by migrants. And guess which group had the largest measurable impact on productivity, cultural cohesion, and local spending? Filipinos. Out of nearly 1.9 million migrant workers in Australia, Filipinos ranked #1 in both reliability and retention. But the story didn't end there. The Australian media from ABC News to The Guardian began publishing features calling the Filipino workforce Australia's backbone. Headlines read, "The Unsung Heroes of the Aussie Economy and How Filipino Workers Saved Rural Australia." Think about that. A nation that once saw us as temporary now calls us essential. And the shift isn't just in tone, it's in policy. The Australian government is now considering new bilateral agreements with the Philippines, focused not on labor export, but on talent partnerships. That's a fancy way of saying they finally get it. They're not just hiring workers anymore, they're courting leaders. In places like Darwin and Adelaide, Filipinos have started being promoted to supervisory and managerial positions at record rates. They're leading construction projects, overseeing regional hospitals, and training locals. That's when Australian officials realized something shocking. Filipinos weren't waiting for permission to lead. They were already doing it. And this is where the emotional part hits, because for every success story, there's also a silent sacrifice. Behind every Filipino nurse smiling at her patients is someone who hasn't seen her kids in 2 years. Behind every engineer designing bridges in Perth is a father missing birthdays back home. These people carry heartbreak like luggage, heavy but necessary. Yet, somehow, they still show up early, ready and grateful. That's what Australians can't wrap their heads around. How can someone go through so much and still care so deeply about everyone else? The answer is simple, because being Filipino isn't just an identity, it's a responsibility. And that's the twist nobody expected. Australia thought they were hiring skill. They didn't realize they were hiring heart. Now, let's talk numbers, because this story isn't built on emotion alone. The latest report from the Philippine Overseas Employment Administration, POEA, confirms that over 32,000 new Filipino healthcare workers were deployed to Australia in 2025, the largest migration wave in Pointer for News history between the two nations. Those workers are now filling critical shortages that could have collapsed parts of the healthcare system. Meanwhile, Australia's education sector reported something unheard of. Filipino teachers are helping revive interest in STEM programs in rural schools. Enrollment rates have jumped 18% since their arrival. Kids who were once skipping classes now show up early because, as one school principal put it, our Filipino teachers bring hope, not just homework. Even the Australian Parliament couldn't ignore this. During a workforce hearing in August, Senator Penny Wong stated, "The Filipino community represents not just skill, but spirit. Their contributions are shaping the very character of our nation." That's when the applause started. But it wasn't just applause, it was realization. Because when a senator from Australia says the future of their nation depends on Filipino character, that's not flattery, that's acknowledgement. And here's the irony. While Australia is publicly celebrating Filipino workers, many Filipinos still face stereotypes, underpayment, and cultural bias. But here's what's different now. They're not staying silent anymore. From Sydney to Perth, Filipino communities are organizing, leading unions, hosting business summits, and even running for local office. The helpers are becoming policymakers. The workers are becoming voices. It's poetic justice. The people who were once invisible are now the ones lighting the stage. And yet, beneath all the praise, a deeper question lingers. What happens if the Philippines finally decides to keep its talent at home? What if one day we stop exporting excellence and start building it on our own soil? Because if there's one thing Australia has proven, it's that when you give Filipinos opportunity, they build empires. Imagine what would happen if we gave ourselves that same chance. So maybe this isn't just a story about Australia needing Filipinos. Maybe it's the world's reminder that respect shouldn't only come after migration, it should begin at home. Here's what Australia learned the hard way. You can buy skill, but you can't buy soul. And the soul of the Filipino? That's what's saving nations. So the next time someone underestimates us, remember this: even Australia's top officials are asking why we're so good at everything we do. The answer? We don't aim to impress, we aim to uplift. If you're proud of that, if you believe the world should finally give Filipinos the respect they deserve, type vision in the comments right now. Because what's happening today isn't just history, it's prophecy. The Filipino spirit doesn't just adapt to the world, it redefines it. And the world is finally catching up.